Thank you everyone for being here today. This work has been done by Catalina Reina Ruiz, the presenter, Dr. José Manuel Gómez Soberón from Universidad Politécnica de Cataluña, and Doctora María Neftalí Rojas Valencia from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. So let's talk about construction traditions in Louisiana that tap into earthen architecture. And to do so, let's have an introduction. Then we would like to go about the Native American earthen building, the European colonial era, the local architectural features compatible with earthen construction, and a conclusion. This study presents some of the history of the use of earth to build in Louisiana. And this is more a mosaic, the contributions of every one of the players of these earthen traditions have brought out something to the table that is not perfectly distinguishable. So everybody brings, or every culture has put something that at the end of the day looks like a mosaic. So starting with the Native American cultures and continuing with the Spanish colonial era, the French colonial era, and the African culture as well. Borders are geopolitical imaginary lines agreed upon or sometimes imposed upon by modern societies. Native Americans didn't really thrive in a specific demarcation of what is today considered a state in the United States. However, construction codes today are different for different states and sometimes for different counties or parishes, as is the case of Louisiana. For this reason, the focus of this section is about examples of earthworks built in the state of Louisiana. As the search for this subject initiated, we'll learn that the only vestige or remains of any earth building done by the Native Americans that inhabited Louisiana are mounds. In a search to investigate this construction tradition and trying to find out what was the oldest mound site, in the database Mendeley on May 5, 2022, we found 19 citations that are relevant to accomplish this goal. And these 19 articles span about 98 years. In all, there are more than 700 mound complexes or individual mounds in Louisiana, built over many years, thousands of years ago, that includes some of the oldest and best preserved structures in the entire North America. In this slide, we can see the south of the state, and it's very impressive because as we have started this conversation in the area about the possibility of building with earth, we have found certain opposition of people thinking that this is non-existent in the state. However, and particularly, in the south, where the climate is more humid and more hot. And we have found that that's not the case, that talking about mound cultures, they did populate this part of the world. With that information, or within this information, the Nolan site in northern Louisiana is the oldest mound site that we can see here. And thanks to carbon-14, it was dated to have been built around 5,200 and 4,800 calendar years before present. The next oldest reference found is Mount A at Poverty Point. It is believed that it was built around 3,261 years before present. And I would like to introduce it using exactly the way it is described at the website of the Office of Tourism in Louisiana, which starts by indicating that this is a World Heritage Site. So the way they describe this site is as a stunning landscape of earthen monuments built hand by hand and basketful by men and women, shaping nearly 2 million cubic yards of soil in a massive 72-foot tall mound, as well as enormous concentric half circles and related earthworks. And we would like to mention that the overall height of the north facade of the White House is just 2 feet shy of the height of Mount A. So this is 70 feet tall. And this is to give us a sense of the enormous work that we see at Mount A. A study aligned with the collaborative ideas of indigenous archaeologists proposed that the way we should interpret and study these places is by concentrating on the descendant peoples that today can help us interpret these findings. And according to their ways of knowing, this research was developed with a small group of a community self-identified as Muskogee in the south of the U.S., and they suggest that these large-scale earthworks represent an owl. And this is fascinating because if you happen to go to Poverty Point, there is a museum that houses thousands of pieces that have been found in the area. And amongst the most beautiful ones are these owls made of clay. And when you realize that a civilization has this contact with the soil and manages to understand its properties and use their hands to shape objects with this this beauty and put it in an oven and work with that, that gives us a huge testimony of their relationship with Earth and how in this case they built magnificent monuments. There are other geoarchaeologists that have investigated the speed at which these sediments and their dates of when they were deposited, as well as investigating the measures of erosion of the soil formation, allowed to determine the pace of construction of this magnificent site. And it is inferred that Mount A needed a large group of people in its construction during a short period of time. This study arguments that the mound was constructed as part of a ritual that integrated this large population. So mounds are an indication of social complexity, community planning, and intra-site spatial organization. Of special interest for this presentation is the description of a mound building technique that uses cane layers of some thickness in the construction of a conical mound raised on a pyramidal platform with 2 terraces, and this evidence was found in 1926 and showed a total height of 12 feet. This is in the Catahoula Parish in Jonesville, Louisiana, and we would like to mention that, as mentioned earlier, the entire state of Louisiana has approximately 700 or more than 700 mound sites, and here we are only focusing in the ones we found in these 19 scientific articles, because the question we were trying to answer was which ones are the oldest. And therefore we have mounds in Morehouse Parish, where we have the Jordan site with 7 mounds. We have also in the Tensas Parish, besides what we already mentioned of Moland site has been actually the oldest. We also have mounds there called Reno, Brake, and Osceola. Then in the Vermilion Parish, there is a complex of mounds that is called the Morgan site. In the East Baton Rouge Parish, we can find Klein Peter site, which is a multi-mound place as well. And these are just a handful of the oldest mounds and mound complexes found in the state. And we would like to mention that the peoples that are considered mound builders peoples, and we would like to mention their names, are believed to have been the Chefunctas, Marshville, Troyville, Cold Creek, Plaquemine, Natchez, and Cadouans. We're thinking from the perspective of somebody that comes from Latin America that the names rarely evoke these peoples. These names probably are more attributed to the scholars, which no doubt have a lot of merit of having worked in these sites from the archaeological and many other perspectives, or maybe the names relate to the owners of the land, etc. And as mentioned, this is more striking for someone that can look at the names of the sites in Latin America, such as Paquemine, Teotihuacan, Tenochtitlan, Chichen Itza, Tikal, Machu Picchu, Coquequirao, Tiwanaku, etc. And it's possible, but we would like to present, put on the table the idea that it's possible to propose new research that investigate innovative ways to find census or consensus for naming sites in a way to honor the cultures that build mounds in Louisiana. During the 16th century, the first European to sail along the Gulf Coast from Florida to all the way to Veracruz, Mexico, that is out of the map here, was the Spanish explorer Antonio Alvarez de Pineda. And when he was sailing the Gulf, he saw a big amount of fresh water coming from the land, and he inferred that it was a river that he named Rio de Espíritu Santo. And precisely, he was referring to the Mississippi River. And despite the fact that the Spanish were the first explorers, the first colonial power to settle in the region was the French. Around the 1680, the French sent Pierre Le Moyne sur d'Iberville from La Nouvelle-France, today Canada, to establish a colony in the mouth precisely of the Mississippi River. And this, we can see, was approximately 160 years later than when the first sailors were navigating the Gulf of Mexico. So this territory that was called Louisiana expanded from the Gulf all the way to Canada, and it was sandwiched between the presence of Spanish in the south and the Spanish from Texas all the way to California. So it's easy to understand this influence of the Spanish culture in the area, and imagining or understanding that they brought their building traditions. And in this area, when the French settled, there were already free blacks that were speaking Spanish. So continuing with starting actually with the African connection, a study indicates that many of the cultural characteristics brought to the American continent by enslaved people from Africa were forgotten, suppressed, or changed by the third generation. And this was purposely done many times to Christianize them. And this is the other cultural influence that we want to present as inevitable, having to exist in the area and influencing the ways the construction with earth took place in this area. And we want to emphasize this image because this is also the type of idea to build with earth that was done by the Native American cultures, as explained previously. And we know that this explanation of forcing to forget or abandon their cultures is makes sense, considering that Africans were coming from diverse cultures where mud-built structures are the norm, where they are everywhere in all the continent with many different forms and as long as 10,000 years old, including the use of the, the earth for flooring, such as the daca floors or adobe floors. Then continuing with the thesis of the Spanish construction method that could have influenced the area by the heavy presence of the Spanish during the colonial era, we found a study that sampled 618 sites throughout the Iberic Peninsula that included both Spain and Portugal. And the reason why we really wanted to show this image right here is that this study also presented some information about the reasons and the velocities at which these constructions could have eroded, and we infer that that was also the fate of the earthen constructions in Louisiana that are dating from those years and that were done thanks to the influence of these empires being present here. We can see here some more examples of those buildings of many years from the 16th, 17th, and older centuries in Spain. Here we have another site that still survives in Spain that was exactly from those eras. The area that today is Louisiana also that was part of the French colonial territories had forts that today have been excavated with archaeological interest in the Alabama area. And although at the beginning we started with the demarcation of the state of Louisiana for the investigation of mounds, for this section we would like to open that border a little bit and talk about these plantations in Alabama that were around Mobile, because Mobile happened to be the capital of the French colony for more than 10 years. And those forts that were then plantations were excavated, and that was one of them was Rochon plantation, and d'Olive plantation, where it was discovered a lot of archaeological material in the form of bricks, handmade bricks or adobes, and that was approximately in 1960. And in the other one, they found poteaux en terre, sections of old buildings, which is the French method that we will explain in a minute. And this is very relevant because these are two of 4 places that have been excavated with archaeological interest. So that makes it a 50% of evidence of the existence of the use of earth to build in the region. And if we consider that those 4 are only 4 of 60 plantations, or that became plantations later in the area, and we account for approximately 46,000 plantations in the United States, the area, if excavated in the future with more archaeological interest, will probably reflect that earthen constructions were the norm as well during those eras. The other influence, of course, we wanted to start with the Spanish influence because it sandwiched the French but then going back to this influence, and also because of the fact that Spain owned the Louisiana territory as well for several years, we found a study that sampled as well all the different earthen traditions in France, which is very, very rich, and located all the different forms of use earth to build that passed to Louisiana. And for instance, one of the constructions that were found in one of those plantations that we just mentioned about before was the poteau en terre or poteau au terre. That means posts in grounds, as one of the French methods of construction. And another study mentions that this method of construction was still employed up to the year 1926, also in 1966, a very, very recent 1966, almost 50 years ago. These methods were still being used in the area, which speaks of the importance and of the force of the tradition that was present in the state of Louisiana. So the different ways in which the French influences to build approach the idea of using earth are the poteau en terre, the pieu en terre, and the poteau sur sol, as well as the colombage. Each one of them is principally based on the use of beams, wood beams, and those could be square or round, and or they could be upright in a trench, or they could have a ground seal or plate, or a sophisticated timber framed buildings such as the colombage. But it's common to all of them, and a method to fill or an infill between the posts with busilage or dough, a clay mixed with a straw or Spanish moss. And these are depictions of those, how is the ending finish of those methods. And this is in Spain, in France, in Aube and at Loire. But this is exactly the concept that was used in those years by the people that later on came to this region. And this is a depiction of a French building of the colombage style. So this other story, there's another study that traces the French vernacular architectural traditions, and there is a missionary geographer, Mr. François Le Marie, who in January 1714, indicated that there were walls made of mud that were whitewashed outside and inside with locally made oysters and oyster shells. And this also is this explanation, or this testimony, of this traveler, of this missionary geographer, also coincides with some of the archaeological evidence found in those plantations in Alabama, because they found this substance called tabby, that is a type of lime that was done by the use of the oysters, and the use of the Spanish moss also is a clear indication of the influence by the natives to help the Europeans find local materials to use in lieu of the materials that they used to have in Europe. So with that, we'll now go to the local architectural features that are compatible with earthen constructions. And we were so lucky to found a plan of the 18th century of a busilage cabin that is a perfect didactic tool to showcase features of this Louisiana vernacular architecture, such as the porch, the eaves, the type of extended, or if we would extend the roof to protect the walls, And this is a cabin, but this is 1,000 square feet. So if this construction method can be reintroduced, and it could also be the bousillage, or we could nowadays use compressed earth blocks. This is a perfect house size of 1,000 square feet in one level, and if the a section of the attic is converted into another room, at approximately another 400 square feet can be gained, and this will be a wonderful house that could help bridge the gap of housing in Louisiana, which is very deep at this time, and more houses are going to be required. So this in this picture we can better see that gabled roof that gives us the idea of the construction styles that can be developed, that can be reintroduced, as said, to protect the walls and to help people find new, more sustainable ways to build with earth. And also, if these methods could be reintroduced and the labor could be provided by the homeowner, we believe that this will really could help tremendously to the current home and environmental crisis that we are all facing. So as a conclusion, we would like to say that the history of the mound cultures is not fully written. More archaeological research with modern techniques will continue to provide information about the construction methods used by the first peoples of Louisiana. And maybe we would know that even they used them for their dwellings, although we don't have them as testimony today, but we could more studies could reveal that. And also we have to give credit to the construction methods that were brought by the Spanish and the French, and of course the African that came with them and that also provided their labor. And if all of these is put together again, we can have these new ideas, like a mosaic, to build modern homes that are still true to the vernacular and the local architectural features of architecture in Louisiana. So thank you very much for listening to us today, and we hope to spark the interest for more research to how these methods could be introduced.